You're listening to the Wired for Impact podcast. We're now talking about sort of the DeFi space. So if we could first sort of set the scene for the DeFi space. And I think another thing that's interesting to think about is on the exchanges, as we're finding, like you can't get every single project. The exchanges really want more stable projects, ones that are sort of tried and true already, that are now available for retail buyers, i.e. you and me. But these other up and coming projects, there's thousands and thousands of them. The exchanges only have a tiny handful of them, but a lot of these are in what we call the DeFi space. So let's first set the scene and then we'll talk about how to make passive income from it.
Yeah. So DeFi is short for decentralized finance. And that is basically a subset of crypto technology, which focuses on decentralized applications and uses of the blockchain that are not strictly, sending money from A to B. So that's what most people think about with crypto. You just send money A to B. But DeFi opens up a whole new world of possibilities using technologies like smart contracts, which allow for more complicated things like decentralized loans, decentralized insurance. There's going to be a lot more that blossoms out of this. But for us, the biggest aspect of it is basically the passive income that you can generate. And so I would say the most popular of these is going to be Ethereum that uses DeFi. That's the most widely adopted token that is using smart contracts in DeFi. And so, you can go and stake Ethereum and get a certain amount of return, which is basically decentralized interest generation. Now, there's reasons that I'm not a fan of Ethereum, mainly the expensive transactions, especially if you're doing smaller transactions. Like I've literally, gone to send $50 and then I'm paying $60 in gas fees, which is just mind blowing. So It kind of caters to people who have a lot more money in their transactions. It's not so good for the little guy. The other thing is it's expensive. Slow and expensive. I already said expensive, but slow too. It can take, 20 to 30 minutes sometimes for a transaction to go through, which is not too practical. So we're focusing on the DeFi projects that are in that XRP ecosystem and that ISO 20022 financial technology realm. And like you were saying, a lot of these projects are not available yet on the major exchanges because they're going for the ones that they have partnerships with and have what they're seeing as more cultural hype kind of at that time. Like if they think people are going to come and buy it, then they'll list it. So the reason that we focus on the ones that we do is because, like we said with Ripple, we follow the money. So we see where's Ripple investing and we can get an idea ahead of time before these exchanges go to list them, which projects are going to be listed. And then when they get listed on the Coinbase or the crypto.com or Kraken or whatever, they're going to get a lot more eyes and a lot more money flowing into them. So it is kind of like buying pre-IPO in a way, not technically, but in a way. So passive income wise, there's a lot of different things that you can achieve within the blockchain realm. There's staking, which is the interest generation. There's yield farming, which I won't dive too deep into, but it's just kind of another thing. There's liquidity pools, which is one of the things that we are getting excited for the XRP ledger, is that they're going to be implementing liquidity pools in the next few weeks to few months here, depending on when the social governance passes. And liquidity pools, for instance, allow for these automated market makers that I was talking about earlier. So if anyone watching is in the traditional financial realm, you've probably heard of market makers, which are people with lots of money that come in and basically make these markets for the various markets. And so automated market makers and liquidity pools are decentralizing that, taking what used to be just the head guys with a lot of money. And now we're allowing people, anybody kind of with any amount of money to participate in this market making. And so we can create revenue from that basically by providing liquidity to these networks, decentralized liquidity, which basically looks like putting in 50-50 of two different assets, say XRP, XLM, whatever, XRP, USD, into a liquidity pool, say it's $5,000 of each. And then anytime someone goes and trades between these two assets, you get paid out a percentage of the fee that they pay for doing that swap relative to what you have in the pool. And so it's a way for them to incentivize the investors like us to participate in these liquidity pools and provide liquidity to these networks. And so that's one way. Staking is another way. Compounding interest generation is something that we're taking back the power of. So, compounding interest is typically been used against us. Like when you ask people compounding interest, they think of their credit cards mostly, right? And
Hmm.
like how the interest is stacking up. And it's been used as kind of a way to financially enslave us, I would say. So now we're getting the power of compounding interest working for us with our money in our crypto. And that kind of looks like, for instance, Corium, we were talking about earlier. This is the main one that we're using in our academy for staking. It's doing around 25% APY, annual returns, but you can claim that literally as often as you want. So you just divide 25% by 12 months. That's how much you'll get in a month. Divide that by four. That's how much you'll get in a week, so on. As long as you're claiming those rewards more often than once per year, you're going to get that compounding interest effect because you're going to claim those rewards. You're going to recompound them. If you choose, you could spend them, but I would say recompound them. And then you're getting that 25% on a larger and larger base amount every time that you claim those rewards. And, you know, there's a lot of magic that can be done with that, with compounding interest, and how quickly you can 2, 3, 4x your portfolio over a number of years just from getting, 25% every year and compounding that. So there's a lot
Hmm.
of opportunities.
So staking, yield farming, liquidity pools, compounding interest generation, any other categories in the DeFi passive income space?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of any. I think
Those are the
that's
primary
the
ones.
majority of the, yeah, of the different subsets.
Okay, let's talk about staking a little bit more and the economics behind that. Why does that work? How does it work?
Yeah, so it's a little bit different for every blockchain. They're going to have slightly different technologies behind it. I'll say with Corium, the way that it works is there is a slight inflationary mechanism built in. So, like we were talking about earlier, inflation isn't always bad if it's controlled in some respect. If you have uncontrolled printing like the US dollar, that's not a good thing.
Hmm.
But if you have a system where the smart contracts are facilitating how much percentage of inflation there is relative to other market conditions, which is what Corium does to basically keep that inflation in check. That inflation is how those staking rewards are paid out and how you can get such a high APY, like 25%.
Can you explain, just generally speaking, what staking is? I mean, I think just so that we're all on the same page. I know what it is, but
Yeah.
it'd be helpful to have a refresher on that.
Yeah. So it's actually providing security and consensus to the network itself. It's not just a random thing to make money. It's actually a core feature or a core purpose. What's the right word I'm looking for? It's a core function of how the network operates. So, let's compare it to Bitcoin. Bitcoin uses a consensus called proof of work, which is the mining. Proof of work is having mining rigs, and you're doing the proof of work, which is all these algorithms to create the blocks to validate the blockchain. Because on the blockchain, there's no one point of centralization, or at least there shouldn't be. And quick flashback to the conscious side of it. This is another one of those things that I see that make it kind of more of God's money system than traditional money, is that kind of like the neurons in the brain, the nodes of a blockchain are like that, where you have no one point of control, right? There's no one neuron that controls the whole brain. There's no
Hmm.
one node that controls the whole blockchain.
Hmm.
And so that's how Bitcoin achieves consensus. With proof of stake networks like Ethereum, Corium, Flare, and others, they're not doing the mining. They're doing a different kind of consensus mechanism, which involves validators providing essentially liquidity to the network to achieve the consensus and the security of the network. And so you can participate in that by staking your coins, and you're participating in the consensus of the network itself.
Okay, so first and foremost, you do an excellent job of simplifying these things, but like I need to dumb it way down
Yeah,
even
yeah,
from
yeah.
that. So part of where literally this is where my mind goes as I was learning some of this stuff is like I have to this is so stupid, but I have to like visualize these things. And so when I think of proof of work from a mining standpoint, like I visualize a miner that's going out with his little pickaxe and I'm sitting there going, you need to prove your work. Like, how do I know that you've actually done this job? So when I think of proof of work, that's what I think of is like verifying that the work, that the mining has actually been done, that there actually is an action that's being taken place that is work. On the proof of stake, to me, that's more of like prove that you have a stake of interest Like if I was buying a company, it's stock in a company, I could buy it literally directly from Walt Disney, where he's proving the work, he's done the work himself, versus somebody who might have a share in the business. They've done jack, but they have an interest, they have a stake in the interest of the company. So I might
Yeah.
buy something from them because they have a stake of interest in the company. So
Mhm.
I had a specific, so staking, is it not essentially like lending? You're lending liquidity and getting an interest on that, or is that
Yeah. Actually,
okay?
yeah, it's kind of like lending, not lending in the traditional sense where, you're lending to an individual and you're going to get a percentage back of whatever you lend or whatever, but it's like lending it to the cloud. You can kind of think about. So like whereas, I like your Bitcoin analogy miner. It is kind of
Yeah.
like a real miner and the computer is the work doing all the
Yeah.
pickaxing. So with proof of stake, I kind of picture it as more like the cloud, internet cloud storage, where you don't have to have these computers doing this physical pickaxing, but you're putting that energy into the cloud, and then that energy there is then serving the greater network and providing a value and function to keeping the network running by having it in that cloud. And at that time, you don't have access to those funds. So that is the lending side of it, where you are kind of lending it to the cloud, you're lending it to the greater good in a way. And then, if you wanted to sell those tokens, you have to go unstake them, which sometimes can be a couple days or a couple weeks, depending on the blockchain. But it's not as instant as other blockchains that aren't using proof of stake.
Okay, so for sort of an analogy, I'm lending money to a friend who's repairing a house. The liquidity on that is not going to be as high as me just putting it in the bank. So the dude might go extra long repairing the house. I can't get the money quite as quickly or whatever, but I'm earning interest on it. What
Yeah.
what what can you walk me through on a practical level? Like maybe there's a project that you can refer to. What is the actual transaction that's happening? You're putting that token, you're staking that token then is applied for whatever. How do I know that I can essentially get that token back? How do I know that I'm not getting get scammed, or that there's not going to be
Mm.
uh, the security on that interest
Yeah.
is essential.
So the security of it in terms of, are you going to get your money back from the lendee? It's a trustless system. So that's really important to understand. You don't have to trust other members of the system to participate and pay you back. Where the trust comes in is in the code itself. So that's what the smart contracts are. They facilitate that. So you're not trusting any individuals. You're trusting that the code is going to run the way that it's intended to, which most of the time it should, because you have all these people checking it. It's open source and people can look at it, make sure it's going to work the way they say. But yeah, I'll talk about it with Quorum because I'm more familiar with Quorum than I am with like Ethereum and others on a technical
Hmm.
level.
Hmm.
With Quorum, you have validators. There's like right now about 30 active validators. And these are people who are actually running like the computers to do the validation. So similar to Bitcoin, but not doing all this, what I think is meaningless, intensive work that sucks all this energy. It's more like passively running a small application in the background on your computer, right?
Hmm.
But it does take a little bit of technical understanding and coding understanding, and that's why not everyone does it. But these validators are the ones that are actually doing the consensus. And if you go to Quorum's website and you go to their little Explorer tab, you can see in real time the blocks being processed. So you see a little thing and it's like, okay, one block, another block, and it tells you each time which validator is signing off on that block. So they're basically approving the transaction. And it's not like a person sitting there going, okay, this one's good, this one's good. It's automated, right? So it's the computer system and the code going, okay, this looks like a legit transaction. We're going to approve it, next one. And
Hmm.
so we as stakers are basically lending our Quorum to those validators to participate in that consensus. So because I don't have my own network set up, I don't have my own computer running this code to be a validator, but I want to participate and I want to make, an interest off of my coins. I essentially stake them with this validator who is doing that work. They get a small percentage of my fees. So they get to set that 2%, 5%, whatever. And that's what their incentive is. And then they're using that energy basically of those coins to create more security and stability for the network. And that's where it gets a little like, it would be hard to explain. I don't even totally understand the technology of how it creates the stability per se. That's more of a programmer area.
World. Yep.
That's the general idea.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Wired for Impact. If you're interested in creating and expanding your impact, be sure to visit us online at impactnow.com.